I am Anthony Reynolds, 38, and for the past 3 years, I have been the governor of this state, though my family still thinks I am a failure. Today I sat quietly in the back of the courtroom as my sister Rebecca faced serious fraud charges. The trial was proceeding normally until the judge suddenly looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Wait, are you Governor Reynolds?" he asked. The entire room froze. Even my mother, who never stops talking, was speechless. Before I tell you how I went from family disappointment to having a judge call me governor in front of my stunned family, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, this story of redemption is one you will not want to miss. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, where success was measured in degrees and dollar signs. Our family dynamics were established early. My father, Harold, was a workaholic surgeon who spent more time at the hospital than at home. My mother, Margaret, was a perfectionist former professor who channeled her ambitions through her children. And my sister, Rebecca, was the golden child who could do no wrong. From elementary school onward, Rebecca set the standard with straight A's, science fair victories, and eventually becoming valedictorian. By contrast, my grades were average, not failing, just ordinary. I earned B's and occasional A's, participated in debate club rather than prestigious academic competitions, and found myself drawn to current events and community issues rather than the sciences my parents valued. "Why cannot you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my youth. At every parent-teacher conference, my mother would sigh at my report card while telling teachers his sister was reading college-level books at his age. The family dinner table was a nightly gauntlet. Dad would ask Rebecca about her academic achievements while glancing at me with barely concealed disappointment. Mom would serve Rebecca the best portions while reminding me that scholars need proper nutrition. It was not that they did not love me, but their love seemed conditional on achievements I could never quite reach. The defining moment came during my senior year of high school. We were having a special dinner because Rebecca had an announcement. She stood up, beaming with pride, and revealed she had been accepted to Harvard Law School with a partial scholarship. The celebration that followed was overwhelming. My father opened an expensive bottle of champagne he had been saving. My mother called everyone in her contact list. They talked about Rebecca's future as a partner at a prestigious firm as if it were already fact. When the excitement finally settled, my father turned to me and asked about my plans, more as an afterthought than genuine interest. "I have decided to major in political science," I said, trying to inject confidence into my voice. "I want to work in public service." The silence that followed was brief but cutting, before both my parents erupted in laughter. "Politics?" My father scoffed. "Politics is for people who cannot do real work. It is for shaking hands and making empty promises." My mother shook her head. "Anthony, be realistic. You will never amount to anything in politics. You do not have the grades for a top program, and you have never shown leadership qualities." Rebecca gave me a sympathetic look, but said nothing to defend me. She had learned long ago that aligning with our parents was the path of least resistance. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed, not to prove them wrong, but because I genuinely believed I could make a difference. Their lack of faith hurt deeply, but it also ignited something within me. College passed quickly. I attended State University, a solid school but not prestigious enough to impress my parents. I immersed myself in political science, public policy, and communications. I joined the student government, organized voter registration drives, and interned for our local congressman during summers. My grades improved substantially when studying subjects I was passionate about, but my parents rarely asked about my academic performance. My graduation day should have been triumphant. I had maintained a 3.8 gigapascals and been elected student body president in my senior year. As I walked across the stage, I spotted my family in the audience. My mother was checking her watch, and my father was scrolling through his phone. They had come only because Rebecca had insisted, as she was in town for a law school function. After the ceremony, my father shook my hand stiffly. "Well, that is done. Have you thought about law school? It is not too late to follow a sensible path." "I am going to work for Congressman Williams," I replied. "He has offered me a position as a junior staffer." My mother frowned. A glorified secretary. Well, I suppose it is a job. That evening, as we drove home, I made another decision. I would move to a different part of the state, away from the constant comparison and judgment. I needed space to pursue my dreams without the weight of their disapproval crushing my spirit. I needed to find out who Anthony Reynolds really was. Away from being Rebecca's underachieving brother, I moved to Springfield, a mid-sized city in our state, where Congressman Williams had his district office. I rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat and started my new life with enthusiasm despite the humble beginnings. During the day, I worked as a junior staffer, answering phones and sorting mail. At night, I waited tables at a local restaurant to make ends meet. The work was exhausting, but I felt free for the first time in my life. Meanwhile, Rebecca passed the bar exam on her first attempt and joined Peterson, Goldman, and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in Boston. My parents called me specifically to share this news, as if to remind me of the success I should have achieved. 3 months into my new life, I returned home for Thanksgiving. Rebecca arrived in a brand new luxury car, wearing an expensive suit and designer watch. Throughout dinner, she dominated the conversation with stories about her corporate clients and the partners who had taken her under their wing. "They say I could make junior partner in 5 years instead of 8, she announced proudly. "Apparently, I am on the fast track." My parents beamed with pride. When the conversation finally turned to me, my father asked casually, "So, Anthony, when are you going to get a real job instead of playing politics?" "I am working for a United States congressman," I replied evenly. "It is a real job." "Answering phones," my mother corrected. Rebecca was arguing a motion in court last week. I swallowed my frustration and changed the subject. Back in Springfield, I threw myself into my work. Congressman Williams noticed my dedication and began giving me more responsibility. I started researching policy issues, drafting correspondence to constituents, and eventually writing talking points for public appearances. After a year, I was promoted to constituency outreach coordinator. When Rebecca won her first major case, my parents paid for a celebration dinner at a 5-star restaurant. I was invited, but could not afford the flight home on short notice. When I explained this, my mother said, "Well, I suppose that is what happens when you choose a career in public service." As if my financial situation were a moral failing, rather than a temporary circumstance. Christmas that year was another exercise in favoritism. Rebecca received a new car from our parents, while I got gift cards and socks. I told myself it did not matter, that I was building something meaningful, but the disparity still stung. Over the next few years, I continued to work my way up. Congressman Williams trusted me with more responsibility, and I began to build my own network of political connections. People in Springfield came to know me as hardworking, principled, and genuinely concerned about their problems. I helped seniors navigate Medicare issues, assisted small businesses with government paperwork, and connected veterans with services they desperately needed. During this time, I caught glimpses of Rebecca's life through social media and occasional family updates. She had a luxury apartment, took exotic vacations, and drove expensive cars. But I also noticed troubling signs. She was representing clients with questionable reputations, posting pictures with flashy businessmen known for cutting corners, and adopting a materialistic lifestyle that seemed at odds with the ethical standards we had been raised with. After 5 years with Congressman Williams, I decided to run for city council. When I told my family my plans during a rare visit home, my father laughed outright. "City council? In Springfield? Is that even a paid position?" "It is part-time," I admitted. "I will keep my job with the congressman." "Oh, Anthony," my mother sighed. "Always playing at success while your sister is actually achieving it." Rebecca at least wished me luck, though her tone suggested she thought I would need it. Against the odds, I won the election. My years of community service had built a foundation of goodwill, and people turned out to vote for someone they trusted. When I called my parents with the news, my mother said, "That is nice, dear," before immediately changing the subject to Rebecca's promotion to junior partner. The emotional distance between my family and me continued to grow. I visited less frequently, called less often, It was not a conscious decision to pull away, but rather a natural consequence of their persistent dismissal of my choices and achievements. They viewed my local political success as small-time, unimportant compared to Rebecca's corporate law career. What they failed to see was that I was building a reputation for integrity, effectiveness, and compassion. My constituents re-elected me by wider margins. Other elected officials sought my endorsement. Community leaders valued my input on local issues. While my success did not come with the salary or status symbols that my parents respected, it was real and meaningful. 7 years after leaving home, I received an unexpected call from State Senator James Martinez, who was running for lieutenant governor. "Anthony," he said, "I have been watching your work in Springfield. You have integrity. You connect with ordinary people. And you get things done. I want you as my running mate." I was stunned. The lieutenant governor position would be a massive leap from city council. When I asked why me, Senator Martinez was direct. "Politics is full of empty suits with the right pedigree but no substance. You are the opposite. You have earned this." After careful consideration, I accepted. We ran a successful campaign focused on practical solutions to everyday problems. I deliberately maintained a lower media profile, partly from natural modesty, but also to avoid my family's inevitable dismissal of this achievement. We won the election, and I became Lieutenant Governor Reynolds. I did not invite my family to the inauguration, assuming they would not be interested. I was tired of having my accomplishments diminished, so I simply did not tell them. As I settled into my new role, reports began surfacing about Rebecca's firm representing clients with known criminal connections. Nothing directly implicated Rebecca, but the whispers concerned me. I considered reaching out, but decided against it. Our relationship had become too strained, and she would likely dismiss any concern as jealousy. Then, 18 months into my term, Governor Martinez suffered a severe heart attack. He survived, but decided to resign to focus on his recovery. Suddenly, unexpectedly, I became the acting governor. 6 months later, I won the special election to complete Martinez's term. I was now Governor Anthony Reynolds. Yet my family still thought I was a small-time city councilman in Springfield, if they thought of my career at all. I had not deliberately hidden my success from them, but I had stopped volunteering information that would only be met with indifference or derision. The irony of my situation was not lost on me. My sister, the golden child, was now under FBI investigation, while I, the family disappointment, was running the state. I learned about Rebecca's arrest from the news, not from my family. The charges were serious: money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. 2 days after the news broke, my mother called me for the first time in months. "Anthony," she said, her voice breaking, "your sister has been arrested. It is all a misunderstanding, of course, but she needs help. I know you have some connections in local politics. Is there anything you can do?" She had no idea she was asking the governor of the state to intervene in a federal case. I felt a strange mix of pain and vindication. "What exactly is she accused of?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Something about her client's money." "It is technical legal stuff," my mother dismissed. "The important thing is helping Rebecca." I took a deep breath. "I will come to the trial," I promised. "But Mom, if she has done something wrong, I cannot make it disappear. You always were jealous of her success." My mother snapped before hanging up. I sat in my office in the state capitol, staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call back and reveal my position, to finally force my family to acknowledge my achievements. But what would be the point? Their approval had stopped being my motivation years ago. Instead, I decided to attend Rebecca's trial quietly, without using my position or influence. I would be there as her brother. Nothing more. If she was innocent, I would support her through the ordeal. If she was guilty, I would help her face the consequences with dignity. Either way, I would not compromise the integrity I had worked so hard to establish. As lieutenant governor, I had focused on education reform, infrastructure development, and government transparency. These were not glamorous issues that made headlines, but they affected people's daily lives. I worked long hours, built coalitions across party lines, and earned respect from both political allies and opponents. When Senator Martinez approached me about being his running mate, I had been hesitant. City Council had felt comfortable, manageable. The state level seemed intimidating. But Martinez had been persuasive. "You understand what regular people need," he had said. "Too many politicians forget that once they reach higher office." Our campaign had been grueling but exhilarating. We traveled to every county in the state, speaking to farmers, factory workers, teachers, and business owners. I discovered I had a talent for connecting with diverse groups, for translating complex policy into practical benefits. Martinez handled the high-profile appearances and media interviews, while I focused on grassroots organizing and community outreach. We won by a narrow margin, surprising the political establishment. At the inauguration ceremony, I scanned the crowd, momentarily hoping to see my family's faces despite not having invited them. They were not there, of course. Later that evening, I called home to share the news. But my father cut me off. "Anthony, we are having dinner with Rebecca's managing partner. Can this wait?" I never called back, and they never asked what I had wanted to tell them. As lieutenant governor, my responsibilities expanded dramatically. I oversaw several state agencies, chaired policy committees, and represented the governor at functions he could not attend. I learned the intricacies of state government and built relationships with key stakeholders across the public and private sectors. Meanwhile, Rebecca's career continued its meteoric rise, at least on the surface. She became a full partner at her firm in record time and developed a reputation for handling complex financial cases for wealthy clients. My parents bragged about her 7-figure salary and vacation home. What they did not mention, perhaps because they did not know or chose not to see, were the rumors about her clients and methods. Through my government connections, I occasionally heard concerning whispers. Rebecca's firm representing businesses with ties to organized crime, her name appearing in investigations that never quite reached the indictment stage, former clients becoming targets of federal probes shortly after switching attorneys. Nothing definitive. Nothing I could or should act on in my official capacity, but enough to worry me as her brother. I considered reaching out several times. We exchanged perfunctory birthday and holiday messages, but our relationship had become a formality. Any genuine connection had withered under the weight of our parents' comparison and our diverging life paths. Then Governor Martinez had his heart attack. I was in a budget meeting when his chief of staff called. Within hours, I was taking the oath of office as acting governor, thrust into a position I had never anticipated reaching so suddenly. Those first weeks were overwhelming. I slept in my office most nights, trying to maintain the administration's stability while honoring Martinez's vision. I had no time to inform my family of this dramatic change, and honestly, I was not sure I wanted to. Years of dismissal had left their mark, and part of me feared they would somehow diminish even this achievement. 6 months into my tenure as acting governor, the special election approached. The opposing party fielded a former attorney general with decades of experience. The polls showed us neck and neck. My campaign team urged me to leverage my personal story, the working-class kid who rose through hard work and integrity. "People connect with your authenticity," my campaign manager insisted. "We need to get your family involved. Show your roots." "My family is off limits," I replied firmly. My private life would remain private, even if it meant losing a political advantage. Despite the challenging campaign, I won the special election by 3 percentage points. Standing on the stage on election night, looking out at the cheering crowd, I felt a complex mix of pride, vindication, and lingering sadness that no one from my family was there to witness this moment. As the months passed, I grew into the role of governor. I assembled a talented team, advanced an ambitious legislative agenda, and maintained the high approval ratings Martinez had enjoyed. Journalists described me as the accessible governor who could discuss policy details with experts in the morning and coach Little League in the afternoon. What few people knew was how empty my personal life felt, despite the professional fulfillment. Then came the news about Rebecca. I was reviewing infrastructure proposals when my chief of staff knocked on my door. "Sir, you might want to see this," he said, handing me his tablet. The headline was stark. Prominent attorney Rebecca Reynolds arrested in FBI sting operation. The article detailed allegations that she had helped clients launder millions through offshore accounts and shell companies. The evidence appeared substantial: recorded conversations, documented money transfers, cooperating witnesses. My first instinct was denial. Despite our strained relationship, despite the rumors, I could not believe Rebecca would knowingly break the law. She was ambitious and perhaps overly materialistic, but a criminal? It seemed impossible. I immediately ordered my staff to gather information, though I was careful to frame it as general interest in a high-profile case, not personal involvement. The reports that came back were damning. Rebecca appeared to be deeply implicated in a sophisticated money laundering operation that had been under investigation for years. 2 days later, my mother called. She did not know I was governor. She did not know I had access to detailed briefings about Rebecca's case. She simply thought I might know someone in the local court system who could help. "Anthony, your sister needs you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble. "I know you two have not been close, but family stands together in crisis." The irony was painful. For decades, I had not been treated as an equal member of the family. Now, when they needed my help, they suddenly remembered I existed. "What does Rebecca say happened?" I asked carefully. "She says it is all a misunderstanding," my mother replied. "You know how ambitious she is. Perhaps she overlooked some technicalities while trying to serve her clients. But she would never knowingly break the law." I was silent for a moment, processing the familiar pattern. Rebecca could not possibly be at fault. There must be an explanation that preserved her perfection. "I will come to the trial," I finally said. "I cannot promise more than that." "The trial starts next week," my mother said. "We expect you to be there every day. Rebecca needs to see her family supporting her." After hanging up, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking. I could attend as Governor Reynolds, with security detail and media attention. That would certainly shock my family into recognition of my success. But it would also risk appearing to influence the judicial process, something I had sworn never to do. Or I could attend quietly, as Anthony the brother, preserving both the integrity of the court proceedings and my personal dignity. The choice was clear, if difficult. I informed my staff I would be taking personal leave for a family matter. I instructed my security team to maintain minimal presence and no official announcements. I would be attending a family member's trial, nothing more. The decision made, I prepared to return home and face my family, not as the disappointment they believed me to be, but as the man I had become, governor or not. I flew commercially rather than using the state plane, wearing a simple suit instead of my usual gubernatorial attire. My security detail, reduced to 2 plainclothes officers, followed discreetly. To anyone watching, I was just another businessman traveling to Boston. The city had changed since I left, or perhaps I had changed in how I saw it. The familiar streets now seemed smaller, the imposing buildings less intimidating. I checked into a hotel downtown rather than staying with my parents, needing the emotional space. That evening, I went to their house for dinner. Walking up the steps to the front door, I felt like I was stepping back in time, becoming again the uncertain young man who had never quite measured up. My father answered the door with a perfunctory handshake. "You made it," he said, as if my presence were unexpected, despite being demanded. "Your mother is in the kitchen." The house looked exactly the same, down to the prominently displayed photos of Rebecca's graduations, award ceremonies, and professional achievements. There were few images of me, and those that existed were outdated, showing a younger, less confident version of myself. My mother emerged from the kitchen, looking older and more tired than I remembered. She hugged me briefly. "Anthony, thank goodness you are here. Rebecca needs all the support she can get." "Where is she?" I asked. "Under house arrest at her condo," my father replied. "Ankle monitor and everything." like a common criminal. The humiliation is unbearable. I bit back the observation that she was, in fact, accused of being a criminal. And not a common one, but one alleged to have facilitated millions in illegal transactions. Dinner was a tense affair. My mother had prepared all of Rebecca's favorite foods, though she would not be joining us. The conversation centered entirely around the case, my parents alternating between declaring Rebecca's innocence and lamenting the damage to her reputation. She was on track to become managing partner, my father said, shaking his head. All that hard work, destroyed by overzealous prosecutors. The evidence must be circumstantial, my mother added. Rebecca would never knowingly involve herself in anything illegal. I listened quietly, noting how neither of them had asked about my life in the 7 years since we had last seen each other. Finally, my mother turned to me. At least wear something decent tomorrow, she said, eyeing my suit with disapproval. First impressions matter in court. I almost laughed. I owned dozens of perfectly tailored suits and appeared in formal settings almost daily. But in her eyes, I was still the disheveled college student who did not understand professional standards. I will try to look presentable, I replied neutrally. And try to make yourself useful, my father added. Rebecca mentioned, you know some local politicians. Any connections could help right now, I nodded noncommittally. If they only knew. The next morning, I arrived at the federal courthouse ahead of my parents. The building was imposing, designed to intimidate with its massive columns and stone facade. I passed through security, where the guards gave me curious looks but said nothing. My security detail positioned themselves discreetly around the courtroom. The prosecution team was already setting up, arranging documents, and checking technology. I recognized the lead prosecutor, United States Attorney Caroline Diaz, from a governor's conference on criminal justice reform. She glanced in my direction, did a double take, then professionally returned to her preparation without acknowledging me. My parents arrived, followed by Rebecca and her attorney. My sister looked both vulnerable and defiant, dressed in a conservative navy suit that could not quite disguise the electronic monitoring device on her ankle. When she saw me, her expression flickered between surprise and calculation. Anthony, she said, embracing me briefly. I did not think you would actually come. I said I would, I replied simply. She lowered her voice. Do you actually know anyone who could help? Mom said you are in local politics now. Before I could respond, the bailiff called the court to order, and we took our seats. I sat in the back row, my parents and Rebecca at the front, behind the defense table. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Judge William Harmon was a respected federal judge with 30 years on the bench. I had met him twice at judicial conferences, though our interactions had been brief and formal. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out a compelling narrative. Rebecca had knowingly helped clients hide illegal proceeds, created shell companies to obscure ownership, and coached witnesses on how to mislead investigators. The evidence would include recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from former clients who had agreed to cooperate. Rebecca's attorney countered that she was an aggressive but ethical advocate who had been deceived by sophisticated clients. Any improprieties were their doing, not hers. Rebecca had simply provided legal services in good faith. As the first witnesses were called, I listened intently, trying to separate family loyalty from objective assessment. The testimony was damaging. Former clients described how Rebecca had explicitly suggested methods to clean money and avoid regulatory scrutiny. Financial experts traced complex transactions designed to hide the source of funds. Email exchanges showed Rebecca was not merely negligent, but actively participating in deception. During the morning break, my parents huddled with Rebecca and her attorney in a conference room. I remained in the hallway, not wanting to intrude. A court reporter approached me, looking puzzled. Excuse me, sir, you look very familiar. Have we met before? I have one of those faces, I replied with a smile, gently deflecting the question. When my parents emerged, they appeared shaken but still in denial. It is all being taken out of context, my mother insisted. Those clients are lying to save themselves. What do you think? My father asked me. The evidence seems substantial, I said carefully. But the trial is just beginning, my mother scoffed. What would you know about federal prosecutions? You work in local government. During lunch, we went to a nearby restaurant. Rebecca was permitted to join us under her attorney's supervision. The conversation was strained, my parents and sister discussing the case as if conviction were impossible, despite the morning's damning testimony. The jury seemed responsive to our side. Rebecca said with unwarranted confidence. Absolutely, my mother agreed. Anyone can see this is a witch hunt. Anthony, my father said suddenly, you have been very quiet. Do you have any insights from what is it you do exactly these days? I work in state government, I replied, the understatement almost comical. Rebecca snorted. Great. My brother the bureaucrat, while I am fighting for my career and freedom. At least I made something of myself before this happened, she added sharply when she saw my expression change. The comment stung, but it also revealed something important about my sister. Even now, facing serious criminal charges, her primary concern was her status and image, not the ethical implications of her actions. We returned to the courtroom for the afternoon session. The prosecution called a key witness, a former client turned informant who had recorded conversations with Rebecca. The recordings were devastating, showing her not as an unwitting participant, but as an architect of the money laundering scheme. Miss Reynolds, the client had asked in one recording, is this legal? I mean, really legal? Legal enough, Rebecca had replied with a laugh. The trick is creating enough distance between the source and the destination. That is what you pay me for. I watched my sister's face as the recording played. She maintained a neutral expression, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the slight widening of her eyes. She knew how damaging this was. By the end of the day, even my parents seemed subdued. The weight of evidence was becoming difficult to deny. As we parted outside the courthouse, my mother squeezed my arm. Tomorrow will be better, she said. Though her voice lacked conviction, Rebecca always lands on her feet. I returned to my hotel room and reviewed the governor's briefing materials my staff had sent. There were several important matters requiring decisions, a reminder that while my family drama unfolded, an entire state depended on my leadership. I worked late into the night, signing documents and making calls. Before finally falling into a troubled sleep, the second day of the trial began with testimony from an FBI financial crime specialist. He methodically walked the jury through the complex web of transactions Rebecca had orchestrated, explaining how money moved through multiple jurisdictions to obscure its origins. His testimony was technical but damning, establishing both the illegal nature of the scheme and Rebecca's central role in it. During his testimony, I noticed Rebecca passing notes to her attorney with increasing urgency. Her confidence from yesterday had evaporated, replaced by visible anxiety. My parents sat rigidly beside me, my mother occasionally whispering, "This is absurd," or "That is not what happened," though she had no first-hand knowledge of the transactions being described. The prosecution's next witness was a former paralegal from Rebecca's firm who had worked closely with her on the questioned transactions. She testified that Rebecca had instructed her to maintain 2 sets of client records, one for official firm purposes and another containing the real instructions. The paralegal had eventually reported these practices to the FBI, becoming a key witness in building the case. Under cross-examination, Rebecca's attorney tried to portray the paralegal as disgruntled and unreliable, but her testimony remained consistent. She described specific instances of Rebecca directing her to backdate documents, alter meeting notes, and remove incriminating details from official records. By lunchtime, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted perceptibly. The jury was engaged, taking detailed notes and watching Rebecca with newfound scrutiny. The press section was fuller than the previous day, as word spread about the strength of the prosecution's case. During the lunch break, Rebecca and her attorney huddled in intense conversation. My parents stood nearby, looking increasingly worried. I maintained some distance, processing what I had heard. The evidence was not just compelling, it was overwhelming. My sister appeared to have crossed ethical and legal lines repeatedly and deliberately. My father approached me as we waited to return to the courtroom. "What do you think her chances are?" he asked quietly. The first time he had sought my opinion, without dismissing it preemptively. Based on today's testimony? Not good, I replied honestly. The evidence is specific and corroborated. He nodded slowly, the reality finally beginning to sink in. I cannot believe this is happening. Rebecca was always so perfect. No one is perfect, Dad, I said gently. Sometimes the pressure to appear that way leads people to make bad choices. He looked at me curiously, as if seeing me clearly, for the first time in years. Before he could respond, we were called back into the courtroom. The afternoon brought more financial evidence, including records of offshore accounts and shell companies directly linked to Rebecca. The prosecution methodically built its case that she had not been an unwitting participant but a knowing facilitator of money laundering on a massive scale. Late in the day, Judge Harmon called an unexpected recess. The court will take a 30-minute break while I review some newly submitted evidence, he announced. As people filed out of the courtroom, my family gathered in a corner of the hallway. Rebecca looked pale and drawn. This is not going well, she admitted, for the first time. My attorney is suggesting we should consider a plea deal. Absolutely not, my mother insisted. You are innocent until proven guilty. We will fight this all the way. The evidence is pretty damning, Mom, Rebecca replied. Her usual confidence shattered. If I go to trial and lose, I could face 15 years. A plea might mean 3 to 5. There must be someone who can help, my father said desperately. Some connection. Some way to influence the process. They all turned to me expectantly. My mother's expression was particularly galling. A mixture of demand and dismissal. Anthony knows nobody important, she said with a sigh. If only you had gone to law school like we suggested. You might have contacts that could actually help your sister now. I said nothing, knowing that the moment of truth was approaching, but unwilling to reveal my position, simply to score points against my family. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harmon looked troubled. He shuffled some papers, conferred briefly with his clerk, then surveyed the room slowly. His gaze passed over the prosecution team, the defense table, the gallery of spectators, then stopped abruptly when he saw me. He blinked, looked down at a newspaper clipping on his desk, then back at me. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition. Before we proceed, he said, his voice carrying in the suddenly quiet courtroom, I need to address a matter that has just come to my attention. He paused, then continued. Am I correct that Governor Anthony Reynolds is present in the courtroom today? A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Heads turned, searching for the governor, not realizing he was the unassuming man in the back row. I stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom fell completely silent. At the defense table, Rebecca's mouth hung open in shock. My mother froze mid-gesture, her hand suspended in air. My father stared at me as if I had suddenly transformed into a stranger before his eyes. Governor Reynolds, Judge Harmon continued, clearly uncomfortable. I apologize for not recognizing you earlier. Had I known you were attending these proceedings, proper protocols would have been observed. No apology necessary, Your Honor, I replied calmly. I am here in a personal capacity. The defendant is my sister. The murmuring in the courtroom grew louder. A reporter near the front practically lunged for the door, presumably to file this unexpected development. Rebecca's attorney jumped to his feet. Your Honor, may we request a brief recess to confer with our client's family? Judge Harmon nodded. Given these unusual circumstances, court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. He banged his gavel, then added, Governor, would you please approach the bench? As I walked forward, I could feel every eye in the courtroom on me. Rebecca's expression had transformed from shock to calculation, likely already considering how my position might benefit her case. My parents remained frozen in their seats, visibly struggling to reconcile their perception of their unsuccessful son with the man the judge had just addressed as governor. At the bench, Judge Harmon spoke quietly. Governor, I feel I should recuse myself given our previous professional interactions. It could create an appearance of impropriety. I understand your concern, Your Honor, I replied, but I am here solely as Rebecca Reynolds' brother. I have no intention of using my office to influence these proceedings in any way. If anything, I would prefer that my presence remain as low-key as possible. The judge considered this. Nevertheless, this development will undoubtedly become public. I need to ensure that justice is both done and seen to be done. I respect that completely, I said. I will abide by whatever decision you make. My only request is that the case be judged on its merits, regardless of who I am or what office I hold. Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully. Very well. I will consider the matter overnight and make a determination tomorrow morning. As I turned to leave, he added, Governor, if I may. This must be a difficult situation for you personally. It is, I acknowledged, but principles matter most in difficult situations, not easy ones. He nodded with newfound respect. Indeed, as I walked back down the center aisle, the courtroom remained unusually quiet. My security detail, no longer maintaining their cover, moved to flank me. Rebecca's attorney was whispering urgently in her ear. Media representatives were frantically typing on phones and tablets, and my parents still sat motionless, their worldview visibly crumbling around them. The courthouse erupted into chaos as soon as Judge Harmon left the bench. Reporters shouted questions, courthouse staff whispered among themselves, and spectators craned their necks to get a better look at me. My security detail tightened their formation around me, creating a small protective bubble. Governor Reynolds, how long have you been in office? One reporter called out. Did you keep your position secret from your family? Asked another. Will you pardon your sister if she is convicted? A third shouted. I ignored the questions, focusing instead on my family. Rebecca's attorney was leading her toward a private conference room, while my parents followed in a daze, occasionally glancing back at me as if to confirm I was real. A court officer approached us. Governor, we have secured a private room for you and your family. If you will follow me. He led us to a wood-paneled conference room and posted guards outside to keep the media at bay. Once inside, with the door firmly closed, the facade of family unity completely collapsed. Governor? My father said, the single word containing decades of confusion and disbelief. You are the governor of the state? Since when? I have been governor for 3 years. I replied calmly. Before that, I was lieutenant governor for 18 months. My mother sank into a chair, her hand at her throat. How is this possible? Why would they make you governor? Even now, her first instinct was to question my worthiness, rather than acknowledge her own failure to see my potential. Rebecca, however, had already processed the revelation and moved straight to calculation. Why did you not tell us? She demanded, her shock giving way to anger. You could have stopped this whole thing before it started. One call from the governor's office and this investigation would have disappeared. That is not how it works, Rebecca, I said firmly. And it is certainly not how I work. But you are the governor, she insisted, as if the title granted magical powers. You have influence, connections. You could have helped me. I am here to support you as your brother, I explained, but I will not abuse my office to interfere with justice. Justice, she scoffed. This is a witch hunt. You, of all people, should understand how the system works. Yes, I understand exactly how the system is supposed to work, I replied. Which is why I cannot and will not intervene. My father had been watching this exchange with growing comprehension. 3 years, he repeated. You have been governor for 3 years, and you never told us. You never asked, I said simply. You never showed any interest in my career or my life. That is not true. My mother protested, finding her voice. We always believed in you. We always supported you. The rewriting of history was so blatant that I could not help but laugh. Mom, the last time we spoke about my career, you called it playing politics and suggested I get a real job. That was after I had already been sworn in as lieutenant governor. We were just trying to motivate you, she insisted weakly. We always knew you had potential. No, I corrected her gently but firmly. You always believed Rebecca had potential. You saw me as the disappointment, the also-ran. You never missed an opportunity to compare us and find me lacking. I knew politics was a good choice for you," my father suddenly declared, as if he had been my champion all along. "I always told your mother you had the people skills for it." The revisionism was almost comical. "Dad, you said politics was for people who cannot do real work. Those were your exact words." Rebecca interrupted this uncomfortable trip down memory lane. "This is all very touching, but can we focus on the current situation? Anthony is governor. That changes everything." "It changes nothing about your case," I clarified. "The evidence is what it island. But your influence," she insisted. "Surely you know the federal prosecutors, the judge." "I have met them professionally, yes. That does not mean I can or would ask them to treat you differently than any other defendant." My sister stared at me as if I were speaking an alien language. The concept of having power and not using it for personal advantage was completely foreign to her worldview. A knock at the door interrupted us. It was Rebecca's attorney, looking harried. "Miss Reynolds, the prosecution has contacted me. In light of recent developments, they are willing to discuss a plea arrangement." Rebecca's eyes lit up. "See? It is already working. They know the governor's sister gets special treatment." "No," I said firmly. "If anything, they will be harder on you to avoid any appearance of favoritism." "The offer reflects that concern," the attorney confirmed. "It is not particularly generous, but it would significantly reduce your potential prison time." The reality of her situation seemed to finally penetrate Rebecca's confidence. "Prison time," she repeated, the words sounding strange in her mouth. "I cannot go to prison. Do you know what that would do to my career, my reputation?" "You should have thought of that before you broke the law," I said, more harshly than intended. She rounded on me, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you? All these years, you let us think you were a nobody, while secretly becoming governor. And now, you will not even help your own sister?" "I am helping you," I insisted. "I am here, supporting you as family. But I will not corrupt my office or betray my oath to give you special treatment." My mother began to cry, the manipulative tears I remembered from childhood. "Anthony, please." Whatever Rebecca did, she did not mean harm. She was just trying to succeed, to make us proud. "By laundering money for criminals?" I asked incredulously. "That makes you proud?" "Of course not," my father interjected, "but people make mistakes, especially when they are under pressure to succeed." "The pressure to succeed," I repeated slowly. "The pressure you put on her. The same pressure you put on me. The difference is, I chose to succeed ethically. Rebecca chose another path." My sister's attorney cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps I should give your family some privacy. But Miss Reynolds, we need to discuss the plea offer soon. The prosecution wants an answer by morning." After he left, security officers entered to inform us that the media presence outside had grown substantial. "Governor, we have arranged for a private exit. We can escort your family out the same way." My parents looked at me with new eyes, suddenly seeing the trappings of power that accompanied my position. The respectful deference of the officers, the efficiency of my staff, the automatic accommodations made for my presence. "We should discuss this at home," my father suggested. "As a family, I have a state to run," I replied. "I took personal leave to be here for the trial, but I cannot neglect my responsibilities indefinitely." "More important responsibilities than helping your sister?" my mother demanded, reverting to guilt tactics. "My responsibility is to 4 million citizens," I said firmly, "including upholding the rule of law." Rebecca had been silent, calculating. Now she spoke with cold precision. "Let me be clear, Anthony. If you do not help me, if you let me go to prison, we are done as siblings. Forever." It was a threat designed to wound, to force compliance. In the past, the thought of losing my family, despite their flaws, would have devastated me. Now I recognize the manipulation for what it was. "Rebecca, I love you as my sister. I will support your rehabilitation and welcome you back into my life after you serve your time. but I will not compromise my integrity. Not even for family. The silence that followed was profound. My sister stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing me not as her lesser shadow, but as someone with his own strength and principles. The governor's car is ready. An aide announced from the doorway. I stood to leave, then paused. I will be at the trial tomorrow. Whatever you decide about the plea offer, I will be there. As your brother. As I walked out, my father called after me. Anthony, wait. I turned back. Are you really the governor? He asked, still struggling to reconcile the son he had dismissed. With the man standing before him. Yes, Dad, I answered simply. I really am. The morning newspapers carried the stunning headline. State governor revealed as brother of fraud defendant. The story had exploded overnight, with reporters digging into my family background and the strange circumstance of a governor whose own family did not know his position. I arrived at the courthouse early, entering through a private entrance to avoid the media circus. Judge Harmon had requested a meeting before the proceedings began. Governor, he said once we were seated in his chambers. After careful consideration, I have decided not to recuse myself. However, I want to be absolutely clear that your sister will receive no special treatment, positive or negative, due to your position. That is all I ask, Your Honor, I replied. Equal justice under the law. When court convened, Rebecca immediately approached the bench with her attorney. They conferred briefly with the judge and prosecutors, then returned to the defense table. Judge Harmon addressed the court. The defendant has agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges of conspiracy and wire fraud. The court will now hear the terms of this agreement. The prosecutor outlined the deal. Rebecca would serve 3 years in federal prison instead of the potential 15 she faced if convicted at trial. She would cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into her clients and former firm. Her law license would be suspended, with the possibility of reinstatement after serving her sentence and completing an ethics program. When asked if she understood these terms, Rebecca stood straight-backed and composed. Yes, Your Honor. I understand and accept them. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. As the court adjourned, Rebecca turned to me. I took the deal, she said simply. I think that was wise, I replied. Not because I am guilty, she clarified quickly, old habits dying hard, but because the jury would never be fair now that they know who you are. I let the rationalization pass unchallenged. Perhaps accepting responsibility would come with time. Outside the courthouse, my parents waited in a private room, having been escorted there to avoid the press. My mother looked like she had aged years overnight, while my father seemed deflated, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. 3 years, my mother said hollowly when we told her the news. My daughter in prison for 3 years. It could have been much worse, I reminded her gently. And there are rehabilitation programs for white-collar offenders. I know the system well, and I will make sure Rebecca has access to education and counseling while she serves her time. My father looked up sharply. You will use your influence for that? Ensuring inmates have access to existing rehabilitation programs is not the same as interfering with justice, I explained. It is part of my policy platform, not special treatment for Rebecca. In the days that followed, I remained in town for Rebecca's sentencing. During that time, something unexpected happened. My parents and I began to have real conversations for the first time in decades. One evening, as we sat in their living room after dinner, my mother asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. Why did you never tell us, Anthony? About being governor? I considered deflecting but decided the time for honesty had come. Would you have believed me if I had told you? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, recognition dawning in her eyes. I suppose we gave you reason to doubt that. You always saw me as the lesser child, I said without bitterness, simply stating a fact. Nothing I achieved was ever quite enough. I was afraid for you, she admitted after a long pause. I thought you would fail and be hurt. It seemed easier to keep expectations low. And I was wrong, my father added unexpectedly. about politics not being real work. I did not understand what you were trying to do. These were not quite apologies, but they were acknowledgments, the first steps toward a more honest relationship. At Rebecca's sentencing, the judge spoke sternly about the seriousness of her crimes and the breach of professional ethics they represented. But he also noted her cooperation and the steps she had taken to make amends. 3 years in federal prison, he pronounced, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Rebecca accepted the sentence with dignity, finally seeming to understand the consequences of her actions. Before being taken into custody, she asked to speak with me privately. I was wrong, she said simply. About many things, but especially about you. I always thought my path was the only way to succeed. There are many paths to success, I replied. Some just have fewer ethical compromises than others. Will you visit me? She asked, vulnerability breaking through her carefully maintained facade. Of course. I promised. You are still my sister. 6 months later, I sat across from Rebecca in the prison visiting room. She looked different, humbler, but somehow more authentic than the polished, performative person she had been. I have been thinking a lot, she said, about why I did what I did. It was never about the money, not really. It was about proving I was special, exceptional. To Mom and Dad? I asked. To everyone, but mostly to myself, she admitted. Their approval was never enough. I always needed more validation. This insight showed a level of self-awareness I had never seen in her before. Perhaps the time away from her former life was giving her perspective. After that visit, I returned to the governor's mansion with a new resolve. My family history had given me insight into the criminal justice system that no policy paper could provide. I began working on reforms focused on rehabilitation and re-entry programs for non-violent offenders. A year after Rebecca began her sentence, I invited my parents to attend my State of the State address. They sat in the front row, watching with evident pride as I outlined my vision for the state's future. Afterward, my father shook my hand with genuine respect. You are a good governor, Anthony, he said, not because you are my son, but because you genuinely care about doing what is right. Coming from him, these words meant more than any political endorsement. I continued to visit Rebecca monthly. During her 2nd year in prison, she began teaching financial literacy to other inmates, using her expertise in a positive way. Perhaps for the first time, when I get out, she told me during one visit, I want to do something meaningful. Maybe compliance work, helping companies stay on the right side of the law. I know all the tricks. After all, that sounds like a worthy second act, I encouraged her. As governor, I helped create a re-entry program specifically designed for former professionals seeking to rebuild their careers ethically after incarceration. Rebecca would be eligible when she completed her sentence. The experience with my family had taught me valuable lessons about governance. Success was not about titles or power, but about using whatever influence you had to improve lives and uphold principles. Family approval, while emotionally significant, could not be the measure of one's worth or achievements. On my last visit before Rebecca's release, she asked me a question that showed how far she had come. Do you think I can make amends? Really make up for what I did? I believe everyone deserves the chance to redeem themselves, I told her. The measure of a person is not in never falling, but in how they rise after a fall. She nodded thoughtfully. You know, you would make a pretty good governor. We both laughed at the irony. As I left the prison that day, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. From family disappointment to state governor, from estranged brother to prison visitor, life had taken unexpected turns. Through it all, I had tried to maintain my integrity and compassion, even when it would have been easier to compromise. In the end, standing in your truth is perhaps the greatest success of all. And forgiveness, I had learned, was not weakness, but strength of the highest order. Have you ever had to stand your ground on principles, even when it meant disappointing family? Or have you experienced being underestimated, only to prove yourself through consistent effort rather than grand gestures? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of redemption and integrity resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of personal triumph over adversity. Thank you for listening, and remember that true success is measured not by others' approval, but by the impact you have on the world around you.